All right, everybody, ready to dive in? Ever find yourself lost in a thrift store thinking, I could do this like professionally? Well, today's deep dive is for you. We're talking about actually becoming a secondhand goods specialized seller.
And it's a whole lot more than just loving vintage teas, let me tell you.
Oh, for sure. We've got RoleCatcher's career guides right here, and they break down how this is a real career path with serious growth potential, not just some hobby.
It's a whole industry that's kind of exploded, especially online.
Okay, so less dusky attic, more digital marketplace. But before we get ahead of ourselves, what does a secondhand goods specialized seller do all day? It's got to be more than just pricing old books, right?
Right. The RoleCatcher guides really emphasize, like, you need serious market knowledge these days. You're not selling mass-produced stuff. Each item's unique, right?
The pricing a vintage dress can't be like scanning a box of cereal at the checkout, I guess?
Exactly. You got to know your stuff, whether it's antique furniture,
Yeah.
rare records, figuring out what that's actually worth, that's key.
Okay, part historian, part detective, part salesperson. I'm already intrigued. RoleCatcher also mentioned something about the work environment changing a ton, right?
Yeah. They said there's a huge shift happening from just those classic brick and mortar shops to like online platforms being huge EE now.
Etsy, eBay, heck,
Yeah.
even Instagram shops, right? You see people selling vintage stuff all over.
It's true. And that totally changes the game for these sellers. Suddenly your customer base isn't just your local town, it's global. You can get really specific with what you sell too.
Oh, so like instead of a general antique store, you could be the go-to person for, I don't know, mid-century modern lamps online.
Exactly. And that kind of niche focus, that's where the real money is.
Now that's turning your passion into profit. But it's not all algorithms and bidding wars, right? There's still that personal touch element to this job, I'd imagine. And at that personal touch, that human connection, it seems super important here. I'm curious, what did Rollcatcher say about the skills needed for this kind of work?
Well, it's funny you should mention that. They actually had this whole section on essential skills, and it wasn't all about knowing your antiques or spotting fake designer bags.
Oh, really? Let me guess. Social media skills. Got to be able to work those Instagram filters, right?
That's definitely part of it, especially with the whole online selling boom. But honestly, one of the most important skills they highlighted was active listening.
Active listening. Okay, that's not what I expected, got to be honest.
Right. You'd think it's all about, like, being a charming salesperson, talking up the merchandise. But RoleCatcher makes this case that to be really successful, you got to listen to what the buyer actually wants, not just what you want to sell them.
I never thought about it like that. Could you give me an example? Like, how does that actually play out in a secondhand shop?
Okay, so RoleCatcher used this example, right?
Yeah.
Customer walks in, says they're looking for a vintage record player. Seems simple enough. You just got to find one in decent condition, right?
Yeah, totally.
But the seller, instead of just pointing to their record player section, they kind of chatted with the customer. And through that conversation, they figured out this customer is looking for a very specific model, one they remembered from their childhood, held like sentimental value.
Wow, so it became more than just a sale, it was like a whole thing.
Exactly. And because the seller took the time to actually listen, understand the customer's story,
Mm.
they were able to find the perfect record player, even though it wasn't the one the customer initially had in mind.
That's amazing. See, now that's something you don't get from just browsing an online shop. Though, speaking of online, Rollcatcher talked about the pros and cons of this career path, and one big plus was that whole flexibility thing, right?
Totally. The guide made a big deal about that, especially now when side hustles and online businesses are like all the rage.
Makes sense. You can kind of set your own hours, work from anywhere.
Exactly. Whether you're hitting up estate sales at dawn or scouring eBay auctions after dark, it can really fit your lifestyle.
Okay, but it can't all be sunshine and vintage finds, right? I remember Rollcatcher mention uncertain income as a potential downside. And that's got to be a little scary, especially when you're first starting out.
Yeah, uncertain income, that's definitely something to think about. Not exactly the same as a steady paycheck, is it?
It's true, especially at first. But like anything, experience makes a huge difference. The more you know, the better you do.
Right. And RoleCatcher had that whole section about career progression, how you can level up in this world.
He did. It's not just about selling more stuff, though that helps, obviously. It's about becoming, like, the expert in something.
They talked about starting as an entry-level seller,
Yeah.
right? Then maybe you move up to junior seller, start getting into the nitty-gritty of pricing and stuff.
Yep. And it's not always about climbing the ladder at some company either. Remember all that online selling we talked about? RoleCatcher said a lot of secondhand sellers, they get good, build their rep, and then
They start their own WN businesses. Exactly. You're already curating your own inventory. Why not be the big boss? But that takes serious hustle, obviously.
no kidding. But hey, if you're passionate about this stuff, finding those diamonds in the rough.
That's what makes it worth it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And RoleCatcher's salary info, GD, setting out can be modest. Got to be realistic.
Right, not a get-rich-quick scheme, sadly.
The more established you get, especially if you've got that niche, you know your stuff inside and out. The sky's the limit.
Okay, I'm getting pumped up just thinking about it. This deep dive has been wild, honestly. We've covered so much ground.
Right. From the thrill of the hunt to, like, the psychology of good sale, this is more than just knowing your stuff.
Way more. It's connecting with people. It's understanding what makes something truly valuable, not just what the price tag says.
And in a world of, like, fast fashion, everything mass-produced,
Yeah.
people are craving unique, quality things again.
Totally. Sustainable shopping, one-of-a-kind finds.
Right.
That's what this is all about. So if someone's listening thinking, hey, maybe this is me, what's the one thing you'd want them to take away from all this?
Don't underestimate yourself. Yeah, there's a learning curve, but if you're willing to put in the work, if you love this stuff, you can turn that passion into something really special.
Beautifully said. Couldn't agree more. And for our listeners, don't forget all the nitty-gritty from RoleCatcher, the salary info, those killer interview questions. It's all on our website. Go check it out. And hey, while you're at it, maybe swing by your local thrift store this week. You never know what treasures or future career paths you might uncover.